China today is a threat to peace in the Pacific and is set on a path to challenge the liberal democratic order of the West and of the United States leadership of that order. I'm Dr. Ralph Defalco, and for 25 years as a naval intelligence officer and for another 18 years as a senior intelligence professional on the Pentagon staff of the Director of Naval Intelligence, I had an opportunity to watch China, to assess China, and to analyze China. During this presentation, I'll share with you some of the insights I gained during more than 4 decades of being a China watcher. What I'll do during this unclassified presentation is give you some idea of how modern China emerged. I'll talk about the domestic policies of China and how those policies are established and enforced by the Chinese Communist Party. In addition to that, I'll talk about how the party state attempts to shape its foreign affairs and its international relations with the rest of the world. I'll also describe China's 100-year plan and the ambitious goals that the People's Republic of China has for the Asia-Pacific region and for the world. I'll talk about how those goals will bring China into conflict with its neighbors in Asia and how it has already created flashpoints throughout the Pacific. I'll also talk about the ways in which this plan will eventually bring China into conflict with the West and especially with the United States. Communist China emerged after decades of revolution, world war, and civil war. But it would be a mistake to think that modern China as we know it today emerged with the communist victory over nationalist forces in 1949. The Maoist regime that came to power after the Communist Revolution can be described in just one word. That word is catastrophic. The Great Leap Forward, the agrarian reforms, the redistribution of land, the plan for the Chinese economy were all massive failures. In the years of the Maoist regime, this meant political instability, turmoil, violence, mass incarceration, purges, the invasion of Tibet, and famine. At the end of the Maoist decade, China was one of the most repressive and impoverished nations on the face of the earth. During the height of the Great Famine, when Mao was told that half of the people in China were starving, he replied by saying, "It is better that half should starve so that the other half can be well fed." That one comment speaks volumes about the nature of the Chinese Communist Party. It's unyielding, it's demanding, it's ruthlessly pragmatic, and it's absolutely dedicated to ensuring that China not only survives, but prospers and grows into a leadership position for not just Asia, but for the entire world. It was not until 1976 and the rise of this man, Deng Xiaoping, that China began to emerge as a modern nation. In fact, Deng himself is often referred to as the architect of modern China. And it's largely because Deng chose very purposefully to modernize the Chinese state. His plan for China called not only for economic growth, but for military growth as well. And that was the real revolution in China. Deng opened himself up to the West. He realized that China needed involvement with the West for Western capital, Western trade, Western investment, technology, manufacturing know-how, and most of all, access to the consumer markets of the West. With access to those consumer markets, he could grow the Chinese economy and guarantee Chinese prosperity. Deng also laid the groundwork for the 100-year plan that is now being enacted today. It was Deng's plan to use military might, economic power, aggressive diplomacy, and information technologies to help China grow into a role as a world leader. That Chinese plan is to create a regime of autocratic states, a regime of states that is absolutely in line with China's thinking, that will help China achieve its goals, is sympathetic to China's ambitions, and will help China become a world leader. Xi Jinping is the current paramount leader of China, and he is the inheritor of the 100-year plan. Xi Jinping has also consolidated power in China. As one of 5 members of the Politburo, he is the man who ultimately makes Beijing's decisions. The Politburo and Xi were informed by three huge events that shaped their ideas of the modern world. Those three events came in close succession: the Tiananmen Square demonstrations, the collapse of the Soviet Union, and finally the Gulf War. What Xi and the Politburo learned from the Tiananmen Square incident was that power, ruthless power, was needed to control and suppress the Chinese people, and they should never be afraid to use it. The collapse of the Soviet Union hammered home for Xi the idea finally that Marxism was a bankrupt ideology, and China could never progress if it continued to marry itself to Marxism. It meant for the Chinese and for Xi that continued advancements in the economy, continued work to grow and develop their international markets was essential to the prosperity and well-being of the Chinese state. And finally, the first Gulf War convinced China that its military forces, modeled on the Soviets, was completely inadequate to face and challenge the West. China could never use Soviet-style military forces and tactics to stand up to high-precision, high-tech, high-velocity, lethal Western and American styles of war.